Once again, welcome back to the Old Soul Millennial channel. In today's video, I would like to teach you how to use a tire changing machine. Now, a little bit about these machines. I purchased these machines a few months ago, and I would describe them as the cheapest tire changing machine and wheel balancer combo kit that you can find on Amazon. Paid a little over $2,000 for these machines. Already did a set of tires on the wife's car, and I gotta tell you, I'm extremely pleased with these machines. They are performing phenomenally well. And we have another job for these machines today. Well, not the balancer, but the changer. So I have a hole in the sidewall on one of the tires on my dump trailer, and you can't plug a sidewall hole, so we need to change out that tire. Thankfully, I have the machine, so we're gonna put this machine to work. Here's a look at the trailer tire in question. As you can see, we have a metal anomaly protruding through the sidewall of this tire. If I take a little bit of Windex here, spray the affected area, you can see bubbles are forming, indicating that we are losing significant pressure. A lot of you are going to say, well, why not just plug the sidewall? Absolutely not. Plugging the sidewall of a tire is dangerous. Top tread portion of the tire, fair game, plug away. But oftentimes, I'll be towing 12,000 pounds of stone in my dump trailer, and then if you factor in the weight of my truck, that's close to 20,000 pounds. I refuse to risk my life and the lives and safety of others over an $80 tire. Here's a look at the replacement tire. Same rating, only cost about $80. It's the right thing to do. So the first thing we need to do is to bleed out any residual pressure in the tire. So we're going to take a valve core removal tool, insert it into the valve stem, rotate counterclockwise, and remove the valve core. Now that all that air is bled out of the tire, what we need to do now is break the bead. In order to break the bead, we're going to use this bead breaker on the right side of the tire changing machine. There's a foot pedal that will retract the bead breaker and therefore separate that bond between the tire and the rim. Now when you're breaking the bead, it's really important to pay attention to where the valve stem is. You never want to break the bead directly over the valve stem, especially on cars with TPMS sensors that are attached to the inside of the valve stem. So I always recommend breaking the bead away from the valve stem. So we're going to break the bead here, and if it's not completely broken, we'll move to this area down here. So we're going to position the tire against the machine, put the breaker on the tire, ensuring that it's not touching the rim, but it's very close to the rim. There's also a scuff guard on this machine. I'm going to press down on the foot pedal. Just like that. So you can see the bead is partially broken on the top here, but I'd like to break it down here, so I'm going to use my knee, rotate the tire, move it back in. Valve stem's down here, still safely out of the way. And we will retract this bead breaker once more. And now the bead is completely broken on the outside of the rim, and we'll do the same thing on the inside. Now that we have that bead broken on the inside and the outside of the rim, we need to lubricate the bead of the tire. And for lubricant, I highly recommend that you use a proper tire specified lubricant. Using other lubricants may cause damage to the tire. The stuff I'm using is this stuff. It's not going to damage the rubber. It doesn't really matter on the old tire, but when we install the new tire on the rim, it's really a smart investment in using the proper lubricant. Now it's time to lift the tire up onto the table and expand the clamps outward. In order to expand the clamps outward, we're going to press on this foot pedal right here. Now I'm going to expand the clamps outward because this is a steel rim. If I had an aluminum rim, I would have the clamps outward and retract them in, and the rim would sit in this groove right here. So I have the rim on the table. I'm going to push down this lever and expand those clamps outward. We are locked and loaded. It is now time to remove the old tire off the rim. So the first thing I like to do is to swing the beak over to where the rim is and observe where the valve stem is. I like to bring the valve stem about 6 inches forward from the beak. So I'll do that now. Just rotate this forward. This has an electric 2 horsepower motor, if I'm not mistaken. So we're about 6 inches away. Reason I like to bring that valve stem 6 inches forward is when I go to take my tire spoon and lift the tire off the rim, that puts 0 pressure on the valve stem. And again, that's really important if you have a TPMS sensor attached to that valve stem. Sorry, I know the backdrop isn't terrific here, but I'm going to do the best I can at explaining this. So with this beak, there are 2 adjustments. You can adjust how far this sits off the rim, and additionally, you can control how far up or down the beak sits. So the first thing I like to do is push this down, and I want to get this close to the rim, but I still want to leave it spaced off the rim a little bit, so that way we don't scratch the rim. So to bring this beak closer or further away from the edge of the rim, you would use this adjustment knob right here. So I'm going to push it down. I can see it's touching the rim right now. I'm going to turn this knob and push it off the edge of the rim. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 millimeters. So the beak is spring loaded up and down. So I'm going to bring it down, and you can see it's spaced away from the rim, maybe a little bit more than 5 mil. Mind you, this is a cheaper tire changing machine, so there is a little bit of flexion in this beak. So if anything, you want this a little bit further away, but I'm just going to turn the screw to show you. You can easily push this out or draw it back in closer to the rim. Also, on this beak, there are these plastic scratch guards. At the end of the day, this is a steel trailer rim, and I don't really care if it gets scratched out, but if I was changing out the tires on my truck, obviously I wouldn't want to cause any damage to those rims. So it is nice that there are those plastic scratch protectors on the beak. So I'm going to set this about there, and I'm happy where that is. And the next thing we need to do is decide how high or down we want this beak to sit. I'm going to push it all the way down, have it come up a little bit just so it's not touching the rim. And then I'm going to throw the locking handle and lock it into position. Now it's time to remove the tire from the rim. Now, again, this is a steel rim. I don't really care about it, but I'm going to demonstrate as if I were doing this on an aluminum rim. So for an aluminum rim, I would use this edge protector. So I would position this about where the beak is. So we'll snap this on the edge, and we'll take our tire spoon, and we're going to put it against the beak, and we're going to hook on the edge of the tire. I'm going to push down on the left side of the tire and pry up on the right side. And you see that edge protector is really protecting our rim. So what's going to happen, I'm going to push the foot pedal here in a second. It's going to rotate this whole assembly clockwise. And when this bar falls, it should fall right on that rim protector. Just continue to rotate. 360 degrees. Let that valve stem come past the beak just a little bit, and we're in good shape. And we will repeat the process with the lower bead. This is where it gets a little bit trickier, but it's not a big deal. So same thing, we'll take our tire spoon, lift the left side of the tire up, scoop this down here on the lower lip of the tire. We're going to pry forward, rotate, and watch how easy this tire comes off. Like butter. We'll swing this arm out of the way, and the tire comes off. Now it's time to install the new tire on the rim. So the valve stem is positioned ahead of the leading edge of the beak. I have the bead of the tire lubricated with that tire mounting lubricant. And additionally, I checked the sidewall of this new tire, and there is no inside or outside, so it doesn't matter which way we mount this on the rim. So I'm going to lift this tire up, position it over the valve stem. I probably should move the camera to the other side. You get a better view of what's going on. So when installing the new tire, the first thing we're going to pay attention to is the lower bead. We're not going to worry about the upper bead. So I'm going to swing the beak in, And I'm going to position it as to where the bead is sitting over this flat part on the back, the rear portion of the beak here. We're going to position it at a little bit of a downward angle. So the tire should be going underneath the leading edge of the beak, and it should be over that back flat part of the beak. Then I'm just going to apply forward pressure and try and rotate this tire, and we'll see if we can get this lower bead to sit. Just like that. I'm going to continue to rotate this forward until that valve stem is a little bit past the beak. You know the drill. And we will repeat the process for the top bead. We'll just push down. There we are. Now there's just a ton of space in between this tire and the rim right now. There's no way I'm going to be able to seat the bead while this tire is on the machine. I have a bead blaster, but I like to use that on the ground. So I'm going to retract the dogs and move this wheel and tire onto the ground, and then we'll use the bead blaster and try and seat this tire bead on the rim. Alright, so a lot just went down and it was impossible for me to talk over the compressor. So let's talk about what just happened and how I got the bead to seat on the rim. So obviously there was too much space between the rim and the tire for this to take air. So how do you fix that? Do not use starting fluid, very dangerous. Use a bead blaster and or tire mounting compound. This is a bead blaster. Basically, it's an air tank that holds up to 150 psi of pressure, and there's a giant, like 1.25 inch ball valve. And what you do, you fill that tank up with air and then position it on the edge of the rim while putting air through the valve stem on the rim. You turn that ball valve and it blasts a tremendous volume of air into the tire, just enough to get it to seat on the rim, and then the rest of the way you can fill up the tire with the valve stem. Now the next thing that happened was the bead popped on both sides of the rim. Now pay attention to this, you got to be very careful with this. So the bead will start to seat, but it doesn't fully seat normally until you hear a pop. Sometimes you don't hear a pop, but generally you hear a little pop. And that will happen on both sides of the rim. When you're trying to fully seat the bead, never exceed 30 psi of pressure, and I'd recommend adding extra lubricant to the tire. If you find you're going over 30 psi to seat the tire bead on the rim, chances are something's up. I'd recommend just starting over, knocking the bead back in, add more lubricant, and then try again. Do not exceed 30 psi when seating the bead. So after I fully seated the bead on both sides of the tire and the rim, heard that pop on either side, I then removed the air filling line, installed the valve stem, and then I proceeded to fill the tire up to its proper PSI specification. And that's all there is to it. So let's go take this tire and put it back on the dump trailer.